Good morning, everybody, and welcome to At Home with Dyslexia Scotland. About a 30-minute focus this morning for teachers, whether it be our existing teachers or our brand new teachers that graduated in recent weeks. I know it's not quite the graduation that you were looking for this year, but many congratulations on graduating to become a teacher, and welcome to the world of education. Dyslexia Scotland would very much like to support you on that journey when you discover children in your brand new classrooms with dyslexia. We don't want you to feel overwhelmed. We don't want you to feel afraid of how to move forward and how to support your children with dyslexia. We want to help you. We want to help you give direction, and we want to help you in order to find pathways for identification and support. And that is some of the areas we're going to look at this morning. So dyslexia is complicated without a doubt, but if we can break through some of those areas that you're finding tricky, whether you be a probationary teacher this morning watching this or an existing teacher, dyslexia gives us so much information every day. The children teach us something new every day with regards to dyslexia. We just want to unravel that for you and make life a little easier and a little less complicated. And that's really what this morning's all about. I'm going to help you to see what to look for within your classrooms. You're going to play detective. It is actually fairly obvious sometimes, and sometimes it isn't, but we want to unravel that for you. How you're going to support your children in the classroom. We're talking making some very minor changes that will have a lifelong impact on many children. And finally, supporting you is absolutely vital. Without your knowledge, without your empathy and your awareness of dyslexia, it's very, very difficult for children to be able to be supported and understood. And finally, we're going to have a few myths along the way as well. There's many myths surrounding dyslexia. I've put up 2 or 3 very relevant myths today that will perhaps break some of the barriers for you again within your classrooms. So it is without a doubt that when you enter your first classroom back in August this year, when you go back rather in August in 2020, that there will be 1, 2, if not 3 children with dyslexia in your class. Some of them may have been already identified to you, others may not even know, the parents may not even know either. But it is without a doubt that there will be at least 1 or 2 dyslexic children within your class. Now, the thumbprint there has great relevance because every single person in the world with dyslexia is totally unique. The characteristics are unique, the way the dyslexia presents itself is unique. So when you think that you found the right way to support the dyslexic child within your class, which would be absolutely fantastic, that way may not be right for the next children that you identify with dyslexia. So when one way doesn't work, it's always really, really important to try and find another way, not to pursue the way that you think is going to work for every single child. You are on a journey of discovery. You're detecting every single day the characteristics within your classroom. And the earlier you can do this, as early as nursery, looking for those signs, the earlier you can do this, it means early intervention. And if we can intervene early and support in the scaffolded, explicit way that many dyslexic children need, then it means great avoidance of something like this. Feeling stupid. I don't like the word stupid, but it's used by many, many learners. That's how people feel about themselves with dyslexia if the learning and the support comes a little bit too late. So I'm asking you as brand new teachers, as existing teachers, to start looking now, start looking for the characteristics and perhaps something that doesn't feel quite right. Listen to your parents also. Parents have great intuition. If they come to see you, listen to them and try and work through it together. So let's get rid of one of the myths to start with, and this one might be quite obvious to some of you, not to everybody. Dyslexia only affects reading and spelling. This myth has been around for many, many years, and it isn't actually true. Reading and spelling could be just a small part of somebody's dyslexia, but reading might actually be a strength. Spelling might actually be a strength. Every single person with dyslexia is different. This next slide is very busy, but it gives you an idea of all or some of the areas that can affect people with dyslexia. Now, I'm just going to move my first graph out of the way there because that's probably blocking the top one. The reading and the spelling is just the basis of many, many people with dyslexia, and it may not even just be that. I'm not going to read this whole slide out to you. I'm just going to leave it up for as long as I possibly can for you to have a look and pick some of them out. What about reading accuracy and speed of reading? Getting fluency up in reading is really difficult for some children. It takes a lot of phonological awareness skills to start with, followed by lots of intervention, explicit support in the spelling, and then the accuracy and the speed will only come with practice and over time. Reading aloud is a very contentious issue. Do we ask our children to read aloud? Don't we? Well, let's ask them. What do you like to do? What makes you comfortable? Would reading aloud make that child feel really, really uncomfortable? We don't want to put them into that position where their self-esteem starts to drop. Organisation, one of our 5 executive functions in the brain. Organisation is very difficult for many, many years and needs to be explicitly supported. The working memory often gets very overloaded in the classroom. You're asking direct questions. What is 5 times 5? What is 9 times 9? And you're asking for a quick response. Sometimes the working memory does not allow us to recall that quickly. Social skills, difficulty with relationships, friendships, often again can be tricky for some children. So I'm building a huge picture here of what dyslexia is. It isn't always going to be that obvious for you, but have a quick look at all the things on these slides, and this is really just some of the characteristics that you as a teacher in the classroom will be looking to put together to build that puzzle towards an identification of dyslexia. But of course, what we don't want to do is have dyslexia masked by other areas. It is an umbrella. There is comorbidity that goes alongside dyslexia. ADHD, for example, for autism, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, all of these things can sit very much side by side. But what we don't want is for dyslexia to be masked. For example, if you have a child in your class that has autism, could they also be dyslexic? If so, then let's support the child as if dyslexia does exist and it does sit alongside autism. I'm putting this slide up for you today because sometimes dyslexia can get very masked by other areas of support that are needed. But what you're really looking for, and the most important part of your discovery and your identification, is what are the strengths of that child? And I think you would probably do this anyway, but in particular, that child with dyslexia is going to be very, very determined. They're going to really want to make you happy with the progress they're making and the work that they're doing. The behavior will generally be very good. The perseverance and the determination will be absolutely obvious to you. But they also may think outside the box. Give them a task to do. Do they do it in a completely different way that you've perhaps never even thought of before? Are they an entrepreneur? Do they come up with these amazing ideas during your circle times, during your discussion times, during your lectures at university? That person is going to think outside the box and they're going to work very, very hard for you. So the strengths are your key. The strengths will support the areas of weakness that you're finding. So look for the strengths in the child first. Here's another myth for you. Dyslexia affects boys more than girls. Now, this myth has been around again for a very long time, and I think we're a bit confused by this one because sometimes the boys with dyslexia are a little bit more obvious than the girls. And this is often because sometimes our girls mature much quicker and they find their own ways of helping themselves, their own support mechanisms through the maturity of the brain. The boys may be quite more happy to have support and a bit more open about the fact that they might not be able to do something. But statistically, dyslexia affects boys and girls equally. So the message for this slide is, don't let the girls slip under the radar. They will often not present themselves as being dyslexic, but the signs may be there. So please look for girls equally as you look for the boys as well. So we're moving on how to support now. How are you going to support your children in the classroom? What areas could you do that makes life easy for you as the teacher because you're very busy, and what would be effective for your children in a few simple steps. You're going to build a scaffold. You scaffold learning anyway. That's what teachers do. You're scaffolding that learning. You're going to slowly dismantle that scaffolding. But sometimes with many dyslexic learners, you might have to rebuild that scaffold for repetition and overlearning. And that may happen on many, many occasions. So just as you start to take that scaffolding away because you think that the learning is set into the long-term memory, you may have to just put that support mechanism back in place for a short space of time for repetition. So if you have to do that, please don't worry. It doesn't mean that you failed in your teaching methods. It means you just need to find another way of doing it. And you can do 3 simple areas in your classroom. They're quick, they're simple, but if you cover these 3 areas, the impact on the student with dyslexia is going to be lifelong. They're going to remember it, and it's going to help them in finding their own discovery of learning. These 3 areas are discretion, time, and what you can do to change your environment. So let's have a look at some of those. So discretion is vital for self-esteem. Self-esteem is a huge problem with people with dyslexia. They don't feel as if they're doing as well as their peers. They can physically see they're not doing as well as their peers, perhaps. Around the primary 3 stage, it becomes very obvious to children. But even down in nursery, in the nursery years, children can see perhaps that they can't do things that some of their friends can't do. So the self-esteem impact and the slippery slope of the self-esteem starts very, very early on. And it is your job as teachers, part of your job as teachers, to keep that self-esteem high. And knowing that they come into your classrooms each day and you understand and you have a little bit of awareness and a little bit of empathy towards dyslexia. What does it feel like to be dyslexic? If the child knows that you understand, that self-esteem is already on a boost. But children with dyslexia all the way through find it very, very difficult to ask for help. They don't want to show you that perhaps they can't do something. They want to show you that they're doing all right. And sometimes they will mask their self-esteem as well. So discretion in the classroom goes a long, long way to supporting self-esteem. And one way you could do that is by having a simple communication link between your children. Are you okay? A simple thumbs up, a thumbs across, all these kind of areas that you use as signals in the class, but do it with discretion. Try very hard not to single out one person that perhaps you know has dyslexia. Go to the whole table rather than to the child, but try as much as you can to check for understanding with total discretion in whatever kind of signalling way you've agreed with the child to use. Self-esteem is an enormous area about anybody's learning, and I think that anybody with dyslexia who has poor self-esteem is going to find it really struggle every day in the classroom. You're going to not want to have a go at something in case you fail it. So if you as a teacher, again, can just normalize dyslexia, because it is normal. It is normal to learn differently. Everybody learns differently. Dyslexia just has a name. So normalize it with all of your children. Perhaps raise awareness in your classroom of what dyslexia is. Raise awareness whole school of what dyslexia is. Look for those strengths and build on those successes, as small as they may be, as large as they may be, but build on those tiny, tiny successes until that self-esteem slope starts crawling up again. Show them that you're not great at something. I'm a terrible, terrible cook. And many children I support know all of my weaknesses. Children think that the teacher in particular has a great knowledge and knows almost everything. Well, of course, teachers don't know everything. Some teachers can't cook also. So tell them you can't cook. Tell them what your weaknesses are. Could you perhaps differentiate in tests? If you're giving a spelling test, instead of that test being out of 20 for some children with dyslexia, could you do that test out of 5 and give their target as 3 out of 5 that week? That's just one very small example, but could you differentiate the tests that you're giving your class to make sure that that self-esteem is boosted, but you're also achieving the aim with the spelling as well. And one great thing about dyslexia, and one great way to support self-esteem, is this great word of metacognition. Knowing yourself, knowing how you learn. How did I achieve that? And I know analysis of tasking within classroom goes on all the time. How did I learn? How did I overcome that? But in particular, children with dyslexia, to have self-awareness, holding your brain in your hands, knowing how you learn, is a great key towards understanding yourself and supporting self-esteem. So one area that we can support in the classroom that takes up physically no time is processing speeds. Being aware that processing speeds with children with dyslexia can differentiate greatly. So if you look at the birthday cake there with the candles on it, and you think of the neurons in the brain like candles, if you like, on a birthday cake, those neurons are sometimes further apart in the brain, the dyslexic brain. That then means that the messages that are being sent to that brain take a finite amount of time longer to receive and then to process and then to give you the answer. So for children with dyslexia, be very aware of processing speeds, and this could be their visual processing or their auditory processing. And the boiling spaghetti at the bottom there indicates the working memory and how full it can get. It can get totally overloaded, sometimes with anxiety. Sometimes it can get overloaded with the information that's coming in. So for you, this isn't about taking your time up. This is just taking time to ask a question and wait, excuse me, and wait for the answer to come back. So just be aware of processing speeds and taking time. You might want to preempt the question you're going to ask. In a moment, I'm going to ask you something to do with the 9 times table. That will then give the child time to assimilate the knowledge. What is the teacher asking me? Can I recall the information? So preempting something. What about chunking? Giving things in small chunks. 2, 3 maybe auditory instructions is quite a lot for some children with dyslexia to remember. So why not chunk it and give it the instructions 1 at a time, or 2 at a time if you think that would be okay. Repetition all the time. To process something, to store something, repeat as much as you can and check for the understanding. Check with it with discretion, the thumbs up, the color-coded cards, whatever will work in your classroom, check for understanding. But just wait for that answer to come back. When you think children may not be listening to you, just give it a little moment, that extra processing moment, and you'll be very surprised that that answer will come back to you. So in the wonderful words of Neil Mackay, the whole class, just teach the whole class as if they're dyslexic and everybody wins. If you follow some of the examples we're about to look at now, including the processing speed ones that we've just looked at, then every child in the class is going to benefit from your method of teaching. Let's have a look at some of the areas that you can support. Make it come alive. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Make that teaching multisensory in everything you do. Use all 3 at the same time. Using just the visual element is often not enough to get information to sink into the long-term memory for dyslexic learners. All 3 at the same time will help it to secure and sync that learning straight into the library that you're trying to store information at the back of your brain. There are many, many different learning styles, over 70. It's not going to be possible for you to discover all of them in every single child, but as suffice to say, if you use more senses, then more learning is going to stick and it's going to have a bigger impact. For children, as they grow, as they go into secondary education, into the academies, preferences can change. Some children may start off as visual learners. As they grow and as they develop and internalize their dyslexia, they may find other methods of learning and other preferences. So teachers perhaps in secondary education, be very aware that your visual learners may in fact become visual and auditory along the way. Code with spelling. Spelling starts again very young, phonics in nursery, phonics in primary 1. To support the dyslexic learner with phonics and with spelling along the way, we need it to be explicit. This is where your scaffolding is coming in, and that scaffolding for phonics and retention of spelling may go on for many, many years. So phonics all the way through primary, scaffolding, explicit, accumulative, repetitive instruction. It may be that that learner cannot just learn spellings by looking at a spelling list. They need to make it come alive, come off the desk, using paper cups for writing their spellings on, using phonics phones for sounding out, and using some form of explicit program. There's just one example on the page here for you, whatever phonics program your school uses, but you may need an awful lot of repetition for phonics. But the key here is that the learner with dyslexia will only learn and remember the learning when they've had suffice repetition in the way that their brain retains information. It may take many years of overlearning to spell a word. And remember that if you do a set of spellings one week, those spellings may not be remembered the following week. And that's okay. That means you just need to do it again and do it in a different way, a different method. You might want to make up some mnemonics, for example. There's an example of the word use at the bottom there. Mnemonics, a great top tip for mnemonics is if you are going to do them, make sure the word you're decoding is actually in the mnemonic. Otherwise, there's no connection to be made there. So if you're going to mnemonic the word use, for example, use shiny elevators, the words in the mnemonic for the pupil to make the connection. Typing, get them typing. Typing Club is a great way, it's a great download you can use in schools, and it's free. And if you want to go towards technology, always good for some children as well, not for all children. The Core Scotland Wheel of Apps has got some fabulous codes, links, websites that you can use, and the majority of them are free as well. Supporting reading, what's again important to know here, that we were never all born wired to read. It's a human intervention. There's no reading center already set within our brains, and there is no reading gene. So as teachers, as parents, we need to create that reading gene. We need to give children ways of learning how to recognize and identify words in books and in pages automatically. We don't want our children to start decoding every single word as they progress up the chain in school. So we need to create a reading circuit in the dyslexic brain. It doesn't always happen automatically for children with dyslexia. For some it does, not for all. So in order to do this, we've got to give that multiple exposure, that overlearning, in order for words to become orthographically automatic. They need to be able to recognize words by sight to give the fluency, and the repetition will give the fluency also. The phonological awareness, the basic skills for learning to read the rhyme, the alliteration, all of those, syllable deletion, all of the phonological awareness exercises are all part of developing this reading circuit in the brain. It's got to have explicit phonic instruction. How do these sound? What do the sounds look like? What do they look like when you put them together? And the comprehension needs to sit alongside reading, as you well know as a teacher. The comprehension is often a little bit tricky, and we're going to look at that one in a second. But again, it needs explicit support with comprehension. It doesn't come naturally. And the fear factor with reading can grow, and it will become more and more obvious as your children would perhaps have avoidance tactics. I don't want to read this book, I'm going to get a drink of water, etc. The avoidance tactics will start to come in, and you'll start to recognize them. Can you link it to that book? If there's a fear factor, the first thing is to bring back the love of reading first. Bring it back by reading to them, by sharing familiar books, by over-reading books, things that are interesting to the child. Get rid of the fear factor and then progress with creating that reading circuit in the dyslexic brain. And comprehension comes alongside reading, and the issues start to develop because there's a lack of fluency. If there's a lack of fluency with the reading, then actually how can we have any spare capacity to comprehend and remember what we've just read? So the comprehension issues come from when we switch from learning to read to reading to learn. and that lack of fluency really does put a bit of a hold on the comprehension. So again, with the comprehension, please don't expect your dyslexic learners to be able to just go away and do that comprehension exercise for you. It doesn't often help like that. Sometimes having the comprehension text read out loud to the child makes a world of difference. If they can hear the story, they could probably answer it for you because they're not having to decode the words first of all. You might want to use highlighters in the text to bring out the important and the relevant points of the text in order to be able to answer the questions. What about verbalizing the answer? There's a specific way of answering comprehension questions in a text. So what about verbalizing it first and then writing it into the sentence? Neil Mackay has a great method in some of his books called the TCPQR method, where you would look at the title first and the content, what's going to come as in the sub-content of the pages, and build a picture, build a big picture of what you think this is going to be about. Draw back any knowledge you might already have of this text, read the questions first, and then read the text so you know what you're looking for. So by Neil Mackay's method, you're building a massive picture first and removing anxiety before you've even read the text. Getting started, off you go, write a story, off you go, write in your diary, whatever it is you're asking children to do. Getting started is really hard. Sometimes because there's so many ideas, the brain doesn't actually know where to start and what to pull out first as a priority. So again, this is where things like writing frames come in. It really, really helpful to give that scaffolded support to get those ideas out. You might want to do stories by using post-it notes, scatter the post-it notes onto a piece of paper in any order, and then help your dyslexic learner to order the story by moving the post-it notes into the order. There's your scaffold, there's the order, then you can write the story. Give some sentence starters, giving some printed notes, giving homework printed, for example. Note-taking frames. Note-taking is really hard to listen and process what's being said to you. So if you're in a classroom or in university, perhaps doing a framework in order to put the notes in, subject, heading, matter, for example. You can record lessons in university, probably in college, but teaching bullet points. And again, in comes that word of chunking that chocolate bar down into tiny little pieces so that we can think about what needs to be processed. Even starting a conversation is quite difficult for some children. Can you think of a word beginning with? Again, very difficult to get started, very difficult to process. And I mentioned earlier organisation on that very first slide that we had, organisation, an executive function in the brain that is often not very well supported. We expect our children, as they get older, to be able to organise their classrooms, organise their trays, organise their homeschool bags. Sometimes it's going to take a lot of support for many years. So could you, for example, categorize things and color code things? A color-coded tray, a color-coded folder, a color-coded timetable for homework, or timetables for those going into secondary very soon for the first time. Color coding is a great way of organizing and categorizing. Time is very difficult for some children, not the telling the time, but the organization of time. I'm going to give you 20 minutes to finish this activity. A sense of time is often missing. What does 20 minutes feel like? So why don't you put a timer on for the whole class? The picture of that timer there is from the TTS website. It's fabulous because, again, that's color coded. You can turn the sound off for children who don't want to hear the beeps. But that timer for the whole class, and I've seen it work, works brilliantly. It's not a countdown anxiety timer. It's making an awareness of what time feels like and how long you've got to finish your activity for. Now, launch pads are great. Launch pads at home in the morning, for children to put their school bags in. But what about a launch pad in the classroom as well? A box that's designed by the child with their favourite picture on the front. So there's a personalisation, there's a belonging, there's a responsibility. And in that launch pad goes the PE kit or goes the lunchbox that you can't find at the end of the day. Everything in one place, in one organisation that is in a personalised box. Now at this point, I'm just going to mention visual stress to you, and the reason I'm going to do this is to show you some of the things that you can change within the class environment. Visual stress is not an optical problem. It's nothing to do with eyesight. This is when children find that words on a white background move across the page. It isn't always known to children. They don't always know why sometimes they can't read something. It could be the fact that the words move around the page. The reason I'm putting this up for you today is often that we go to the coloured rulers, as you can see here, or the coloured overlays, as very much a default position for some children. What I would say is know why you're using these. Know the reason you're using these is to stop the words moving around on the page. And you could help many, many children with these if they're available in your classroom. Coloured paper, coloured overlays will help lots of children, because what happens is you read black writing on a white background, sometimes the words will move. Now there's a lot more to visual stress than I'm telling you today, and there are many websites that you can look this up on, or you can come back to Dyslexia Scotland and we will give you a helping hand with this. But if you are going to use coloured overlays, please know why you're using them. They're also great for chunking the writing in books as well and taking away anxiety. So with visual stress in mind and colour coding, what you can also do in your classroom that is simple and effective for the whole class is change the background colour of your whiteboard or your smartboard. That white glare is going to probably affect maybe one child, maybe two children in the class, but actually to put a pastel colour on the background is going to help everybody, and it's not going to harm anybody rather. So why not do that? Pastel shaded paper, I know it's expensive, but I think many schools now are using buff colour paper for their letters, things going home for children and for homework printouts as well. And the matte paper definitely reduces the glare when reading as well. What about your text you're using on the whiteboard? What about text you're using on worksheets? Can you differentiate them for absolutely everybody, so every single child can access the written work on the board and the written work on their worksheets? How wonderful would that be? Resources boxes in classrooms are becoming quite popular, and to make a resources box in your own classroom could simply be from what you've already got. So you don't need to go out and buy lots and lots of things. The idea of the resources boxes is to build metacognition. And this box could sit in your classroom. It does not need to be labelled that it's a dyslexia resources box, because this is a box for everybody. I've seen them work in primary schools and I've seen them work in secondary schools, and they are fabulous. Children walk into the class in the morning, they go to the box and they take what they think they need to support their individual learning. So they're becoming independent. They're recognising the resources and the methods they need to support the way that they learn, and not everybody else. It might just be a highlighter. They may just need an overlay. They may need a pencil grip. What about some post-it notes? There are lots of things you can put into resources boxes, and you can contact us at Dyslexia Scotland to give you a little bit of help and ideas on this. A simple plastic box, labelled resources boxes. You will be amazed how many of your children delve into this box every day to help their learning and build their metacognition. If you've got any doubt at all, ask the experts. Over the years that I've been supporting dyslexic learners, children as young as primary 1, primary 2, they know what they need. They know what that doesn't work for them. They know what supports them and what doesn't support them, even if they don't recognise that they think they're dyslexic. But if you ask them, what can I do to help you? Would this make it easier for you? Did that work? You'll be absolutely amazed at the answers that they come out with. So if you've any doubt whatsoever, please ask the children in your class how you could possibly support them with their dyslexia. Now, last but not least, it's supporting you. Without you, without your knowledge, without your awareness, and without your empathy of dyslexia, that the supports will practically come to a stop. We need our children to feel comfortable when they walk into the class, knowing that you are going to be able to help them and support them. But we need to support you too, and that's exactly what Dyslexia Scotland does. The website is full of information for you. Please have a look at it over the summer holidays if you've got time. Just have a look at the most amazing leaflets that are there, all the events that are going on, all the branches that you've got local to your schools that could support you and support your families as well. The Dyslexia Scotland at Home at the moment on YouTube has got a plethora of videos going on. Have a look at some of the information that's on there, that's there just for you and for your families as well. Dyslexia Scotland run a helpline from Monday to Friday with trained experts to answer any of your questions. Use this as a first resort, not a last resort. They will help you as much as they can. And for yourselves and the professionals in particular, the education conference is going to take place virtually on Saturday, the 3rd of October. And you are able to book your place right now via the Dyslexia Scotland website. So please go online and have a look at that today. From past experience, it's absolutely fantastic. The Addressing Dyslexia Toolkit is again another area that I would encourage you to look at over the holidays, especially if you're coming new to this, into teaching this year. This website, again, it's a toolkit that is made just for you. It's a quick reference guide, answers to many, many questions on here, how to support your readers, how to support your numeracy, etc., etc. This is your quick reference guide, and this is your pathway. What do I do? Where do I go next? What is the staged intervention? Go onto this website and have a look. And on here also are 3 professional modules that you can go through and help your learning. CPD on here, 1st, 2nd and 3rd levels, recognised support and education for you. So it just leaves for me to say, in the words of Rita Pearson, that everybody deserves a champion. You are going to be a champion to many, many children over the years to come. But just remember that we at Dyslexia Scotland are very much here to help you on your dyslexia journey. And we wish you lots and lots of luck in your new classrooms. Thank you so much for your time today.